Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, it's Jocelyn Hardrick. I'm the host of Journey to Esquire, the podcast, and the founder and director of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit behind this podcast, the blog, and our scholarship and leadership program. I'm so excited today. We have another great guest for you. We are passing the mic to Barbara J. Pittman. She is the owner managing attorney at the law offices of Barbara J. Pittman, PA. And that office has been in existence and proudly serving the public primarily out of their Tampa, Florida office since 1995. Attorney Pittman is a native Floridian. She's a proud graduate of Florida State University for her undergrad and her law degree. She's been a practicing trial attorney since 1986 and is a former prosecutor with the Hillsborough County, Florida State Attorney's Office. She's also a former agent with the National Football League, NFL, and is currently licensed in the state of Florida as an athlete sports agent. She represents professional athletes with legal matters and provides hands-on personal attention to all clients. And the majority of the firm's practice is in the area of family law. So they're doing lots of things with divorce, child custody, child support, juvenile law, visitation, and time-sharing rights. But she also does things like criminal defense, automobile accidents, and personal injury. You know, as anyone who practices in these areas know, they overlap a lot. Especially representing athletes, that stuff comes up and they need someone who they can turn to that they can trust to guide them. And so she provides free initial consultations for all practice areas, has flexible appointment hours tailored to your availability, and accepts all major credit cards and other forms of payment. So if you're looking for any of these services, make sure to hit up Ms. Pittman. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey to Esquire.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to start right at the beginning. You know, sounds like you've been practicing a long time. I was really impressed that you went straight from the state attorney's office to your own practice, and that's what you've been doing ever since, for decades now. But let's go back to when it started. What made you initially want to be a lawyer?
Okay, this is a story, and I have to preface this by saying the statute of limitations on what happened has expired, so I can't be held accountable. But when I finished undergrad at Florida State back in 1977, the country was in a bad recession and jobs were hard to find. I graduated with a degree in communications. So it was my intent to either, go work at a TV station or, based upon my minor, go into some type of marketing and advertising firm. Well, my last semester in undergrad, I did an internship at a TV station. Of course, they had us on camera. I was terrible, absolutely terrible. So I'm sorry. Okay, I'm graduating. This is not going to work, clearly. And of course, I couldn't get a job in advertising. So I was still in Tallahassee, and a friend of mine knew these two attorneys who were opening up their law practice. So I went to work for them. I worked there for about, 7-8 years, and I was primarily assigned to the attorney that does the criminal defense, a gentleman by the name of Roosevelt Randolph. We call him JR for short. Where back then, things were a little, so now we're talking late 70s. Things were a little bit more, shall I say, relaxed in the courtrooms in Tallahassee. So JR did, at that time, he was strictly doing criminal defense. So, but he was not a morning person, even though he opened up, at the time he opened his practice, he was leaving a long-term prosecutor with the state attorney's office up in Tallahassee, Leon County. But he was not a morning person, and they had 8:30 court hearings for arraignments, the initial court appearance. So what he would do, a client would hire us, I would, type up the paperwork, and then I would take the paperwork to court for him. So on this one particular day, and this is the way it would normally work, because all the judges knew him. There wasn't a whole lot of judges in Tallahassee at the time doing criminal defense. So they all knew each other and they all knew him. So when they would call a case and it was his, I would stand up. So the judges all knew me too. And they go, oh, okay, Roosevelt Randolph is representing his client. And I would go, yes, Your Honor. Now, I'm just a legal assistant slash office manager slash investigator, not an attorney. So then the judge would say, okay, bring up the paperwork and tell Mr. Randolph the next court date is ABC. And I would go, okay, and I would leave. So on this particular day, one of my boss's colleagues was there also handling a case, a gentleman by the name of Henry Hunter. We call him Skip. So Skip's case was called first, so he waited for me. My nickname is BJ. So he said, well, BJ, is your boss in his office now? I said, probably he's there. He's going to walk back with you. So we walked back to the office. And as soon as we opened the door and went in, my boss was standing out in the lobby. And Skip looks at me and he goes, BJ, you can handle a case just as well as your boss. You need to go to law school. And of course, I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. So my boss, JR, looked at me and goes, BJ, that's a good idea. I'm going, okay. At this time, think about it. I had been out of undergrad for like 6 or 7 years. Study habits were kaput. So I'm thinking, there's no way I can do law school. I don't have the study habits. I don't have anything. So I kind of dismissed it from my mind. But my boss kept at me. He kept saying, what do you think about law school? So finally, I said to him, I don't know whether I can do the work because my study habits are stuck. And I've heard you guys talk about how challenging law school is. And I know most law schools, they don't want you to work during your first year, okay? And, I'm single. How am I going to support myself if I don't make it? I have to quit my job here. I don't make it. I won't have a job. So JR said, we will make you a deal. You get accepted to law school. So you apply to law school here. And I did. I applied to Florida and I applied to Florida State. I got accepted to both. And he said, you get accepted to school here or even in Gainesville. If you go, you don't make it, we have a job waiting for you here still. Well, okay, at this point, I'm like, oh, well, dang, now I got no excuse. I said, okay, so I started law school. Obviously did not flunk out after my first year. So, and that firm also after my first year, since I was in law school, they gave me a job clerking. So I clerked them the last 2 years of my law school career and then left. So that's how I ended up in law school. And of course, when I tell that story now, people say, well, you're practicing law without law. I guess I was, but I didn't know. So that's what I'm saying. I'm sure the statute of limitation have passed and I cannot be prosecuted for that. So that's how I ended up in law school.
That's too funny. Well, you didn't technically speak on the record, right? So you're just like, yes.
Technically, no.
Somebody else represents them. You weren't pretending to be a lawyer.
I was somebody else, right. Exactly. I was just answering the judge's questions that the judge asked me.
There you go. There you go. So now you said you got into Florida State and Florida, which is in Gainesville. And I'm guessing based on your location, you just need to be close to where you're already living and working. But talk to us about the application process. So, because there's still some steps, right? You still got to take the LSAT and you got to decide where to apply. You got to look at, decide between the different law schools. How was that for you?
Yes, and the reason why I only applied to Florida and Florida State was because obviously Florida State, I was already in Tallahassee because I figured if I got accepted there and decide to enter there, I wouldn't have to move. I wouldn't have to, because I had my own apartment. I could stay in my apartment. So that figured into primarily, and of course, being a Seminole already, that figured into it. But with the application process, I do remember how grueling it was in terms of all of your addresses. Thank goodness, a college student, you kind of have a lot of addresses during college. Okay. So I had to go back and rack my brain and remember those. Thank goodness, the only left home after I graduated high school and went to Tallahassee. So other than the house where I grew up in with my parents and my siblings, all the other addresses that I had were in Tallahassee. And when talking, with prior roommates, it was kind of easy to recreate that. But that was a bit of a challenge. It had me a little nervous. And then I think just before I applied for school, I remember getting a speeding ticket. I was driving from Tallahassee up. I'm originally from Jackson County area, Mariana area up in the Panhandle, and I went home for a holiday or something like that, and got a speeding ticket. Well, I was always getting speeding tickets. So I was speeding. I just call my dad, Daddy, I have a speeding ticket. He goes, okay, send it to me, and he take care of it. So I think I got one just for the application process, and I had given this speeding ticket to my father, and I could not remember when the due date was for it to get paid. So I remember panicking, like, oh my goodness, I need to call Daddy to make sure, he got this speeding ticket paid. So I kept, on him, like every day for like about a week, and finally he goes, girl, the speeding ticket is paid. Okay, leave me alone. We're like, okay, Daddy. So, and it had. But other than that, other than the speeding tickets and traffic, that was pretty much it for me. My work history, I had only had, let's see, I worked on campus while I was in undergrad. And then obviously after I graduated, I'd only had the one job at the law firm. So that was simple also for me to get that information done. But the application process, you have to, it's a very meticulous process, okay? And what I suggest is that you do what I did. If there's something you cannot recall, because again, especially if you're applying to law school in the state of Florida, okay? Whatever help you need, if you need to go to, if you have some speeding tickets or some traffic tickets that you don't recall, reach out to those jurisdictions. Most of them are glad to assist you and give you the information that you need. In terms of work histories, now sometimes, if you had a prior work history and you left a job and you did not leave on good terms, you may have some trouble getting documentations you need from them. So that's why I always advocate, if you leave a job and you have aspirations going to law school, try to leave on good terms. And that helps. But the application process can be a bit daunting.
And what about the LSAT? What was that like for you? Because you mentioned earlier you had already been out of school 6-7 years.
Yes. Now, I would not recommend that anyone did what I did, because I admit, because I was kind of like pushed to apply to law school by my employer, and then number one, didn't think I was going to get accepted. I did not take a prep course for the LSAT. I do not recommend that. Okay. Obviously, it worked out for me because my score was good enough for me to get accepted to the University of Florida and Florida State. But you take a prep course. I know money sometimes can be a problem, but it's so helpful, because I think now that if I had, my LSAT score, I'm pretty sure would have been higher than it was. Again, even though it was acceptable to get me accepted. So, but I highly recommend a prep course. I recommend prep courses for the LSAC. I also recommend prep courses for the bar exam. Even though, and I'm going to digress again, when I was at the state attorney's office here in Tampa, one of the assistants that came in after I started working there, that was sort of like my subordinate, I was a supervisor. He moved to Tampa from Ohio, and he did not have money for a prep course for the bar exam. So he did not take the prep course for the bar exam. And he passed it on the first time. And I mean, everybody in the office was amazed by that. And, I asked him, well, how did you do it? He just said, I just studied nonstop. But he didn't recommend either. He said the only reason, he just did not have the money for a prep course, but he did not recommend not taking a prep course. And I do recommend, because when I took the bar exam, I had already started work at the state attorney's office in the first month, because I graduated law school December of 85. I started work January the 6th of 1986, and I had to work that entire month of January. They gave me the entire month of February off, from February 1 leading up to the bar exam with paid leave to take the bar exam. But my bar prep course started in January. So I was working and going to a bar prep course, and it was a bit hard, but trust me, it was well worth it.
Oh yeah, and nowadays the students, like, the rigor of undergrad is so different. Students really can't do well on any of these tests without some kind of prep course. Because when we went to undergrad, right, you still had to memorize things. Everything was closed book, none of
Yes,
this sliding scale stuff with grades. You weren't going to make it out of college.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So now you're in Florida State. Do you enjoy law school while
Mhm.
you're there?
Okay, Josh. Honestly, not so much. and here's why. Because I had to change. It was a life-changing experience for me. Remember, I had been out of it had been a 6-year period, 6 or 7 year period of time from when I graduated grad and started law school. Now, during that period of time, and when you had lived in Tallahassee, okay, I had been there for a while. So, I had friends there. We get together and do things. We play cards, we like go parties, happy hour, all that good stuff. Weekends were just like full of fun, fun, fun. Well, I had to change all those habits because I had to get all this studying in. And it was I'm not going to say it was a bit of adjustment. It was a heck of an adjustment for me to get to do it, because once I got accepted and I had the assurances from the attorneys at the firm that I worked for, that if I did not make it past the first year I had a job, then I felt compelled, okay, well, I got to do this, okay? That, and, for family reasons, because you got to know my family, okay? If you start something and you don't succeed at it, then it's kind of like, you failed. Now, I come from my parents had 9 children, okay? And they all expect high achievement from us. So I didn't want to be the one, because I had other siblings that had advanced postgraduate degrees. I didn't want to be the one that said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't make it through grad school. So it was a bit of a challenge, but I got it done. I just set up a routine, a daily routine for studying, for doing whatever. So what I would do, I would take, I think it was Friday nights, after I would finish classes on Fridays, I would not pick up a book. Friday was my decompress time. On Fridays, I would, go out to dinner, with friends, hang out with friends, that type thing. But Saturday and Sunday was a routine for law school. So, and that worked for me. And that's what I would suggest, because you can't be, as we call it back then, in the books 24/7. It's just not a working formula, and it's not good for anyone to do that. So that was how I did it. And, it worked out.
Yeah, that's good. Don't feel bad. I didn't enjoy law school either, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and that's the way to become a lawyer. So you just get through it, make the best out of it, and I was the same way. Weekends were for studying, and that way I can spread out my studying instead of trying to cram it all in during the weekday. But we have so many students now who work and do so many, have families, and so they have to get creative with their schedules.
I know. I know.
So
I know.
so you mentioned earlier you ended up at the state attorney's office. So talk about how you ended up there and what your job search process was like.
Oh, that's another story. One day I think I should probably write a book. Okay. Here's how that happened. The first semester of my third year, okay, back then, we were not 1 year, 2 years, third year. We were like first year, second year, third year students. So now Florida State's philosophy, they encourage internships and really want you to do internship, but not your last semester of law school. Florida State requires, and I don't know whether you did an internship, Josh, but so you know this, the last semester of law school, you were required to be in class. So the internship, and I know, based upon the experiences I had at the law firm, again, being assigned primarily to J.R. Randolph, who's criminal defense. At that time, criminal defense, oh my God, I love criminal defense. I used to do everything. He had me doing investigations, sitting in on interviews, reading police reports and deciphering police reports, everything. So at that time, criminal defense, I figured was my forte, and I knew I wanted to litigate. And I was told by the attorneys at my firm that if you want to litigate, the 2 best litigation places would be public defender's office or the state attorney's office. Okay. And also at that time, I figured that I had probably run my course of living in Tallahassee, and I wanted to leave, but I did not want to leave the state. So I had kind of narrowed the places that I wanted to go to Tampa and Miami, because obviously, during my life, I spent lots of time at both places, and I love both. So one of the attorneys in Tallahassee that I knew an attorney that worked at the state attorney's office here. Okay, Eric Myers, who later became a judge, and he's now retired. So he asked me to contact Eric Myers. So I called Eric Myers and asked him about an internship here in Tampa. And Eric gave me the information and gave me the contact person. So I got the internship. But again, it was the first semester of my third year of law school. So I was assigned to the misdemeanor, what we call back then was the traffic division, but all traffic cases. They did speeding tickets, they handled DUIs, everything. I was assigned to the traffic division. Shortly getting close to the time my internship was ending, one of the attorneys that was supervising me asked me if I wanted to do first chair, which I could do as long as he was there sitting second chair. He was the actual assistant state attorney on a DUI case. And I said, sure. Oh, nervous as heck, But I figured, this is good experience for me. So we did we got there for the trial, and we started the trial. And while I'm, getting ready to do, I picked the jury and everything, picking the jury and everything. We got a message that our lead police officer, I can't remember exactly whether he was running late or he was stuck on a case or something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, we started the trial, did opening statements, so forth, so forth. So when it came time, I think we called the DUI person. And when it came time to call the police officer was not there. And at this time, we could not find him. Okay. Well, of course, at this point, jury had been sworn in, so jeopardy had attached. So the case ending up getting dismissed. After the trial, maybe about a week after the trial, I'm sitting at my desk in the office at the state attorney's office where all the attorneys were assigned to the traffic division, where we used to call it the bullpen, because it was one big room and we each had desks in this one big room. Oh, we had so much fun, but that's another story for another day. So I'm sitting there, and the way my desk was positioned, my back was to the door that led the main entrance into that room. So I'm sitting at my desk, and I hear someone call my name, Barbara, who was the division director for the traffic division. And I turned around, and it was the division director. His name was Chuck, and the state attorney at this time was Bill James. I had never met Mr. James, okay? And I looked, but of course I recognized him, and I turned, and it's Chuck and Mr. James. And of course my mouth kind of dropped. Of course I'm thinking I'm in a world of trouble, right? I'm like, well, otherwise, why would the state attorney be coming to see me? So Mr. James came, and he said, Barbara, he introduced myself. He said, I have something I want to show you. So he gave me this letter to read. And to sum it up, the defense attorney on the other side of that DUI case that got dismissed had written this letter to Mr. James telling him what a great job I did, number one. And number two, he did not know I was an intern until after the case was over and the jury had been released. And then the judge started talking about me being an intern. That's how he knew that I was an intern. So based upon that letter, after I read the letter, of course, the only thing, and I feel so stupid now, the only thing I could think of was, okay, to Mr. James was, I didn't win. So Mr. James said, well, sometimes winning is not everything, which is true. But again, I was at a loss of words. So he said, well, do you have job prospects when you graduate? He's out here, you graduating in a few months. I said, no, not yet. I'm still looking. He said, how would you like to come work here? And I said, I'd love to come work here. He said, okay, you got a job. Call us when you graduate. That's how I got the job.
That is awesome.
I know, right? So when I see that attorney who's getting close to retirement, I always tell people, and I introduce people, I said, he helped me get my first job out of law school. And he always got, you earned it, Barbara, you deserved it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
When I was a CLI, I did 11 trials because I was in the juvenile division. So, they do misdemeanors and felony, no jury.
Right.
So every week was a trial, right? As long as everyone showed up.
Right.
So I did 11 of them. And I remember someone at the state attorney's office, one of the paralegals, said, why do you get a lesser caseload than the other attorneys? I said, because I'm an intern. She was like, whoa, I had no idea you're going to court and doing all this
You
stuff.
didn't know.
And she worked there with me,
right?
handing me the files, thinking I'm the new attorney hired there. But that's how tremendous those CLI, internships with the state attorney or PD offices are. I mean, you're working with people who are willing to let you try a case, especially the low stakes cases, right? So all the cases are important. Right. Some of them in juvenile, everyone's getting probation. It's
right.
And the witnesses may or may not show up. So it wasn't like high stakes, in case you made a mistake. And the attorney is right there with you. So you're good to go. That's a great story, Barbara. Yeah, and I know. I was appearing in front of him when I started practicing, and remember when he retired. And he's been around the block a lot of times. So
yes.
So now let's talk about how you ended up in your practice area. So I know, of course, you started in criminal, you were working in criminal, you loved it. How'd you get into all this other stuff, especially like the sports agent work? Because a lot of students I talked to, there was like, entertainment and sports law is always the most popular student organization because everyone thinks they're just going to do it or it's going to be entertaining or they get to meet athletes all the time. And I'm like, that's not quite what the practice is like. But since now we have someone who's a sports agent, let's talk about how you got into that practice area.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Those are hard areas to break into. Well, let me clarify something. When I left the state attorney's office, I did go to work for a firm, a small firm. Okay. And I did that for about 7, 8 years before I opened up my practice. When I went to work for that firm, I left the state attorney's office, and my boss there, he wanted to start a family law division. Okay. So he goes, Barbara, here, you starting the family law division. And I go, okay. Had never heard of, again, I'm coming from the state attorney's office, so all I knew was criminal defense. So what I did there, I did criminal defense, a little bit of PI initially until I got into the real flow of starting the family law division. So then I kind of, left the PI cases to the PI attorneys that were in the PI division, and I just did criminal defense and family law. So I started the family law division from the ground up at that firm, and apparently it worked out very, very well. And it's so funny because I was the only attorney there that did family law. No one else wanted to touch it, including my boss. No one wanted to touch family law, which gave me some autonomy, which, I appreciated. So at the time when I decided to go on to open up my own practice, and I went and told my boss, then I asked him, I said, so how do you want to handle the family law cases? He said, if they want to go with you, take them. He said, nobody else here, Barbara, nobody else here wants to do family law. I said, okay, fine. So, of course, I reached out to the clients and let them know what was happening. And they all did come with me to my new firm, which gave me a clientele, believe it or not, because it's hard to open up a new firm. Sometimes I have clientele. So I had all my family law cases. Also, at that time, I was doing, in addition to doing criminal defense, probably retained criminal defense, federal and state, I was also on the court-appointed list for Hillsborough County 13th Judicial Circuit to handle felony criminal court-appointed cases. And I was also on the list, they call it the CJA panel in federal court to handle federal criminal defense cases. Okay. So I started doing that. And after I opened up my firm, I have a cousin who lives in Fort Myers. He went to Stetson University in DeLand on a basketball scholarship. And now he in Fort Myers, he teaches and he coaches. So he came across all these athletes. Deion Sanders being one of them. Deion Sanders was in his he used to do these workshops and things. So Deion Sanders in these workshops. So he and I used to talk sports all the time because he knows I'm a sports fanatic. So we were talking and, he goes, well, PJ, again, everybody calls me PJ. He said, we were talking about sports agents. And then I said, you know what? I said, I think the best sports agents are probably attorneys. He said, I agree with you. He said, you interested? I thought about it. I said, what, becoming a sports agent? He said, yeah. He said, I think you'll be good at it. And I thought about it. Like, okay. So I looked into it. Now, at that time, to become a sports agent, all you had to do was submit an application with some background information, pay a fee. You did not have to take a test. Okay. Now you have to take a test. Okay. Also at that time, when I initially became certified by the National Football League Players Association, the agents did not have to have malpractice insurance, okay? Which I wasn't concerned about that anyway because I had my own malpractice insurance through my law firm. So I applied, got accepted and became a sports agent. So then I decided, well, if I'm an NFL agent, then I might as well become an agent with the state of Florida also. Now, the state of Florida at that time did require a test. And the test was based upon, I don't know where they changed it, but at that time, the test was based upon the NCAA rules, okay? So when I submitted the application to the state of Florida, the Athletes Agents Division, with the fee, and then I can't remember whether they gave me the NCAA rule books or whether I had to get them on my own. It's been so long, I don't recall. But at any rate, that's what I had to study for the exam for Florida. I had to study the NCAA rules, which was, again, here we are again, back to studying. But I did it, for a period of time. I just set aside a period of time. I looked at it as if I was in law school again. So I set aside a period of time during the week when I would come home from work, and I would carve out an hour or two every night, and I would read those books, okay, and study those books so I could be prepared for the test. Because I only want to take that test, one time, just like, everything else. So I did, and I took the exam and I passed it, and I got certified as an agent. Now, as an athlete agent with the NFLPA, you're required every year to attend a seminar to keep your license accurate. Okay. And the main seminar is in Indianapolis, Indiana in February at the same time as the football combine. So that's one that everybody went to. Now, there's a black an organization of black sports agents that also kind of have their own little niche, and they will also do a convention. And I did attend, and of course, attending the convention there also counted toward the certification requirement. So I did that a couple of times because you could go to California, they had their seminars in really, really nice places. But anyway, normally I went to Indianapolis. And of course, you can imagine Indianapolis in February. Okay. I was always lucky though. I never got caught in a snowstorm. It was always either have snowed before my plane landed or it was going to snow after I got out of there. So I was lucky that way. So during the course of that, I got to meet a lot of agents. Okay. Obviously, because again, agents come from all over the country. So now here's what primarily, there are two things that primarily ended my career as an NFL agent. First thing was my cousin in Fort Myers, we were talking. I said, well, maybe I should do a brochure, okay, that, I could pass out. So we put a brochure together, but then something in the back of my mind said, you probably want to check with the Florida Bar about this. And I did. I made a call to the Florida Bar and I told them what I was doing. And they go, well, first of all, we need to proof your brochure. I said, why? It's an athlete agent brochure. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with my law practice. And what I was told, I'll never forget it. As long as you have a bar license, you are a lawyer first. And you still have to follow our rules, which means, Ms. Pittman, you can't solicit for clients. I was stunned because that's how you get athletes as a sports agent, primarily through solicitation. Now, at this time, I did have a couple of clients, not big name, okay, not Tom Brady, type, Patrick Mahomes type clients, but I did have a couple of clients that were on NFL rosters. So I'm like, okay. Now, because what I had figured out, the reason why I decided to come with the brochure, because I found out that, and if any of you out there want to become an NFL agent, keep this in mind, okay? Agents poach clients from each other. It's just the nature of the business, okay? And that's what was happening to me with my higher name clients. I kept losing them to other agents, which is why I came up with the idea for the brochure. But then after the Florida Bar told me that I can't solicit, I'm like, well, this is useless because now what I have to do, I have to wait for the athletes to either find me as an agent or for someone to refer them to me. And another thing I find out, now the athlete agent business is a little shady. I was getting phone calls all the time, like at least once a week. I would get a phone call from Joe Blow telling me, oh, I am a coach in Mississippi. I have contact with a whole lot of potential NFL and college five-star athletes that I can send to you. Okay, my first question, okay, what do you get out of this? Well, you got to pay me X amount of dollars. I can't do that. Okay. So again, that was another problem. Okay. But again, that type of stuff goes on all the time. But for me, it was just not doable because again of my license. So finally, after a few years, because let me back up. In the course of me meeting all these agents from all over the country, like Josh said earlier in this, athletes need lawyers. And I hate to say this, but a lot of them need family lawyers. With me meeting these agents from all over the country, if they had a client that had a family law case in the state of Florida, they would call me, okay? And, refer the client to me, or if I couldn't handle it, then I would assist them in referring the client to somebody else. But I built up a niche business, just by representing athletes in family law matters. So then I decided, well, you know what? This is more lucrative anyway, because right now I'm just spending money on this athlete agents thing because the NFL thing, because agents keep poaching my clients. Oh, and another thing that sent me running was the NFL PA decided that all athlete agents needed to have a separate malpractice insurance policy. separate from the malpractice policy that I already had and has as an attorney, which made no sense to me, number one. And number two, when I looked into the cost of those policies, they were much more expensive than the malpractice insurance policy that I have. So I decided, okay, this makes no sense. How am I going to justify, carrying two malpractice policies? So I just decided, okay, I'm going to give up my license for the NFLPA. I will still keep my Florida license active so I can still operate as an agent within the state of Florida and just represent the clients that the other agent sends to me on family law matters. So that's what I've been doing since then.
Wow, that's an awesome story. So that's a good warning for folks who are interested in
Yes.
being Florida lawyers. The rules here are
Yes.
so much more strict than other states.
Exactly. Exactly. So don't do anything without checking with the Florida bar. That's more of the story. Do not do anything because you don't want to lose your license as a result of this, being an
Yes.
athlete agent.
And that kind of segues into what advice you have for our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are aspiring to be attorneys. Either they're in law school now, or they're in college, or they're like you. They took a break from college and they're thinking this lawyer thing might be for me. And some are brand new lawyers trying to figure this thing out. So, what advice do you have for our listeners?
Okay. Well, for the brand new lawyers, if you are in the firm, then obviously you should be okay because you have people that you can talk to. You have mentors. And that's invaluable in this situation, especially when you're just coming out of law school and getting the practice of law. If you don't have that type of thing behind you, then I mean, there are lots of attorneys like me that are out here that are willing to be mentors to you guys because you don't want to do something that's gonna. I mean, your bar license is valuable. You work so hard to get it. You don't want to do something that can be avoided to lose it. If you have not already joined a voluntary bar association, do so. That is a really good place to get mentors. Like Josh and I are members of various voluntary bar associations. And you can go there, join, you meet people, you strike up conversations with people. Some of them even have little sections carved out to doing mentorships. You want to do that. Now, if you're thinking about going to law school, like we talked about earlier about the application process, not only for law school, but if you're gonna planning on thinking that you may want to practice in the state of Florida, then obviously you have to submit an application to the Florida Board of Bar Examiners. That's a whole different ball game. And obviously, as Josh knows, I am an emeritus member of the Florida Board of Bar Examiners, which means that I served as a sitting member from 2012 to 2017. It's a 5-year appointment. And once my term as a sitting member ends, by becoming an emeritus member, now I just, I pick and choose what activities I want to get involved in terms of hearings and reviewing files and that type thing. But those of you who are in law school, if you pass your first semester, then you probably already heard the spiel that a member of the Florida Board of Bar Examiner has come out to your law school and given to you, because we do that several times a year, do's and don'ts for your application. Because what I find out is that, you don't want to be in a position where the first thing I would say, and I know that there's a fee involved, but if you're planning on practicing in the state of Florida or getting a Florida license, submit your application early because number one, it's cheaper. And number two, the investigative process starts earlier. So if there are any problems with your application, there's time to attempt to resolve them before you take and pass the bar exam. So if you pass, you won't get held up in getting admitted because you've already passed the investigative portion or the background check. Some people call it the background check. You've already passed that. So it's in your best interest to start early. Another thing about that application to the Florida Board of Bar Examiner, I can just tell you this, okay? You cannot give us too much information, okay? We always tell applicants to err on the side of caution. If it's something you think we're not asking, submit it anyway. If it's something that we don't need, then we just say, okay, fine. The person was meticulous. Okay, not a problem. But if you leave out something, all right, That's where you get into problems because, if it's something that we consider maybe disqualifying, something that may keep you from getting admitted, then then you could have a problem. Or if there are problems and you have to we have hearings sometimes when there's a problem that can be resolved by the staff at the Florida Board of Bar Examiners. They send it to the board, and we have to have hearings, and that can take time because we only had scheduled hearings primarily once a month, and that's in one location around the state. So it takes time to get these things done. So just err on the side of caution and submit everything that you think that we want to know. Okay. And again, as with your law school application, if you need to reach out to third parties or other collateral sources for information to assist you in completing the application, please do so.
Yes, I know someone who recently went through
Yeah.
that process and she got an attorney to help her. So you can have representation as well if you end up having an issue. So keep that in mind too. You're not in it
Yes.
all by yourself.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
also on the grievance
The
committee.
attorneys, the attorneys come in. Say this: the attorneys. Most people that have attorneys' jobs, that's when they're at the hearing stage, where they're either attending, and we have two hearing processes: an investigative hearing and a formal hearing. Most people, if they're going to hire an attorney, they do that. But to piggyback on what Josh says, if you're not sure while you're going through the application process as to what needs to be submitted, hiring an attorney that specializes in this area of work is a great way to go.
Yes,
Okay,
it
sorry to
is.
interrupt, Josh.
No, it's okay. Sometimes we forget we're becoming attorneys and convincing people they should hire us, and we're like, no, no, you have to hire an attorney too. You, a lawyer who represents herself has a fool for a client, so be very careful about that. Because I know lawyers who do that too, specialize in that now because they were like you, Barbara. They did work with the Florida Bar committees on this, so now they're experts in what's needed. And listen, I have a lot of students, especially students who are older, like we were. I was 4 years out, you were 6 years out, but I have students who are 20 years out of college. They've had whole lives. Things are going to happen. Life is going to be
Mm-hmm.
lifing. And so sometimes the bar just wants to look a little deeper to make sure, everything is there. And I always tell them they want to know if they can trust you. So if you didn't disclose something, that gives them pause. That's why it's better, like Barbara said, err on the side of just disclosure because you can't tell them too much. They get all in your business, let's be honest. And it is what it is. It's a privilege, not a right. Because I used to work for the Florida Board of Bar Examiners and as an exam grader, and that's the kind of stuff they said. They said we want to be fair, but this is a privilege, not a right. So you have to earn it, and they're the ones who get to decide. So now let's look on the flip side, right? Because you're looking at the Board of Bar Examiners, people trying to get
Yes.
in. Now we have people who are already in. They're going through a grievance process if something kind of went wrong. And that's, this is a part of like our diversity, equity, inclusion talk because wellness is an issue with grievance processes, lack of mentors, people just getting overwhelmed. I assume a lot of the grievance is not people behaving badly on purpose. It's just people who are making mistakes and getting caught up in, overwhelm, and especially new attorneys who now we're kind of like in a it's not quite a recession, but the hiring isn't as much as it used to be, right? So a lot of students are just putting up a
Right.
shingle right out of law
Right.
school. And I'm like, man, you don't know what you're doing yet. You
Right.
got to be careful. Any tips about the grievance process and your experiences with that?
Yes, and you raise a good point. So again, if the audience out there, if there's anyone there who has recently hung up your own shingle or thinking about it, a mentor in the area. Well, first of all, the first thing you want to do, you want to get a mentor. Okay, at least one mentor. Okay, now if you're going to practice several areas, you want a mentor in each area, but I don't recommend you practicing a whole lot of areas right off the bat because that's how people really get in trouble because there are various rules and statutes and everything's different. Okay, because a lot of people, especially the way the things are these days when they hang up a shingle, they feel they need to represent every client, that potential client that walks through the door with a legal problem, and that's a recipe for disaster. Okay, because number one, you don't know what you're doing. Number two, you get overwhelmed. And number three, everything blows up in your face. Okay. So the primary thing to remember about the grievance process is that yeah, people get grievances filed against them all the time. Heck, I've had them filed against me. Most of them don't go anywhere. It's just people just want to vent. And a lot of them are taken care of at the bar level where they can resolve them, okay? However, if they can't resolve them, and then, you have to respond with your comments concerning a particular issue, and the bar feels where we need to send it to a grievance committee, okay, then fine. The main thing is that whenever you hear from the bar or grievance committee or anything about a complaint, don't ignore them. Do not ignore them. I can't tell you the multitude of people who get in trouble because they just decided, well, if I don't respond, if I don't look at this, it's just going to go away. It's not going away. Okay. It's not going away. All it's going to do is further dig a deeper hole for yourself. Okay. So respond to queries from the bar. Give them, normally when they're contacting you, they're asking for, in addition to your response, they may be asking for documents. Okay. Give them to what they want. If you hear from the grievance committee, the same thing. Primarily, they're asking for your comments and documents. Give it to them. As a matter of fact, during the years, and I can't remember what my length of time on the grievance committee was, whether it's 2 or 3 years. During that period of time, I recall us only having, I think, maybe 2 or 3 actual hearings where we had to bring in the attorneys, because most of them we were able to resolve after we heard from the attorney, okay, with documents or their version of what happened. We were able to resolve those matters without having full-fledged hearings. So I think 2 or 3 hearings is the most that I recall. But that's the main thing, is just, just give them what they want, be candid, because people will complain to you about anything, okay? About anything. Because most of the general public know that there is a bar complaint process, okay? And, I've had opposing parties on the other side that I didn't represent file complaints against me. They don't go anywhere, but they file them, okay? And of course, and I don't know about it until I hear from the bar dissolved. I'm like, oh, they filed a bar complaint against me. Okay, all right, didn't have to do anything with that. So, it happens. So if you get a bar complaint, don't feel like you're the Lone Ranger, okay? Because it happens, especially if you've been in practice for a while. Okay, so just follow the rules and do what they ask you to do. Give them the information that they want. If you do have to go in for a hearing, then as Josh said, that's the time you may want to consider hiring an attorney to represent you if you actually have to go to a hearing.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I had to talk of someone I know off the ledge because they were about to file a bar complaint about an attorney, and they weren't even there when the thing happened that they're complaining about. I'm like, slow down. I was like, let's pick up the phone, call that attorney, and see what happened. How about we start there? And they were able to resolve it. But people are quick on that trigger for the bar complaint.
Oh, yes.
And it's kind of the comment section of social media. Don't take it personal. People just say stuff, right? They're mad about this, that, and the other, and you look like someone they can blame it on in the moment. But of course, like you said, the more serious things, they will send you correspondence, respond right away, and take it seriously, because they are taking it very seriously. And again, it's all about making sure they can trust you. If you don't respond, now their suspicion is up, and now they want to look even deeper. And it may be something.
Exactly, and they think you're hiding something. So you don't want to give that impression.
No, ma'am. Well, thank you so much, BJ. Can I call you BJ now?
Sure, you can call me. Everybody can call me BJ. I'm so used to it now. I got that nickname at like 16 from one of my cousins. So yeah.
Wow, I've never heard someone call you BJ. We hang out and see each other a lot. I've never heard it. So
I know.
I want to call you Miss Pittman because out of respect. But I'm gonna call you BJ. Thank you so much for joining us today.
BJ is fine.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us for another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. Support, share, subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.